Hello and welcome to In Conversation with the history holders of the American Dance Therapy Association, a project made possible by the Marian Chace Foundation. My name is Dr. Jacelyn Biondo. When I first conceived of making these videos, I hoped to capture the words of the women who studied with the firsts in our field: Marian Chace, Trudy Shoup, Mary Whitehouse, Alma Hawkins, Blanche Evan, and Lillian Espinack. What culminated in the process was an opportunity to have these women share their stories and their memories in their own words, and to capture these parts of history for future generations. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy our conversations. I'd like to welcome Sharon Chaiklin into the conversation today. Hi, Sharon, how are you?
I'm doing okay. And how about yourself, Jacelyn?
I'm good, thanks so much. So we're just going to jump right into some questions for you. And the first question that I have is, with whom and where did you study dance therapy?
Oh, that was a million years ago. I interned with Marian Chace at St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C. I got there because of Beth Kalish, who was a dance therapist, was already working with autistic children, and she had a story in our magazine from college, because we both graduated the same year at Sarah Lawrence College. And she said, I wrote to her and said, how did you get to do this? And she said, oh, just go down and see Marian Chace at St. Elizabeth's Hospital. And that's how I got started there, really based upon her recommendation.
That sounds interesting. Just go see Marian Chace and down at St. E's and she'll help you out.
Right.
I love that. So what were some of the things, the ideas, the concepts that drew you into the field of dance therapy? What made you want to do this type of work?
I always wanted to be in the helping profession. And at first I was going to be a social worker. Mm-hmm. But dance had been so important for me, and I knew how important it was, so that when I heard of this combination, it was like, oh, no question. I have no idea what this is about, but this is what I'm going to do. And that's how I got down to see Marian and get interviewed by her first, whether she would allow me to really just basically follow her around as she worked.
And can you share a little bit about your dance experience up until that point?
Well, I always, as a child, danced, but I was never really given lessons. And when I got to college and I saw people in classes, I began to audit this class and audit that class and audit the next class, until Bessie Schoenberg, who was the teacher at that time, said, why don't you make this your major? Because you're auditing a whole major in dance. So that's what I did. I changed and made it a major. And it was a very important experience for me from the very beginning.
Can you say a little more about that, how it was important?
Well, that was really how I learned what dance therapy was about, because through the years of my own dancing and what I choreographed, etc., it all changed in relationship to who I was and how I was growing. Of course, during those years of being in college, one changes a lot, but it all happened through the dance and through what was happening there. And I recognized it. And so I understood how important dance was to me. Therefore, it had to be important for other people too.
I love that. And I love that, over the years, that still stays. There's so many times that I talk to students that say, I wasn't quite sure, but I knew that there was something in the dance, even before some of us knew what dance therapy was.
Right.
And so that was all prior to your time studying with Marian Chace, correct?
Correct, yes.
So you had this general understanding of the power of dance through taking dance classes and wanting to be in the helping field that really pushed along this kind of destiny for you a little bit.
Right, because I was still going to be a social worker until I found out about dance therapy.
So can you, Sharon, share a little bit about your experience studying under Marian Chace, what that was like?
What was it like? Well, it was a very exciting time for me.
Mhm.
And of course, at that time, I already had 4 children and I was driving from Baltimore to Washington. So it was a real commitment to come down there and do this. But when I got in there, it was so meaningful to me. It made so much sense to me, even though I still didn't understand it for quite a while.
Mhm.
And so watching her, and that's how I learned from her, was observing, because that's how she taught. You observed and then you asked your questions. She didn't tell you anything. You asked her questions. And I found myself repeating questions in different ways until I understood what she was doing and what it was about. It was very exciting for me to watch her work.
So I'm imagining, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that at that time you were observing work with people with schizophrenia?
Primarily, yeah, primarily schizophrenia, other kind of psychosis too, but yeah, and but yeah, it was at St. Elizabeth's, was a very large federal hospital,
Mhm.
and at that time, I would guess there would be about 5,000 people there.
Mm.
So there was quite an assortment of people.
And can you share a little bit about like the general idea of what one of the sessions you would observe looked like and what your role was in it?
Yeah, I remember walking with her into a session, and one of the things she very clearly said was, when you walk into the session, it has begun. The minute you open that door, that's where it begins.
Mhm.
And so we would walk in, and the tenor, she would pick up what was happening, what was the feeling of what was going on, the tension level, etc. And when we went into and set up things, people came and gathered themselves into the room, and it just began. And it was magic to me what she was able to do with a large group of people.
About how many were in a group at that point?
Well, it varied, of course, but I'm thinking of the largest group may be about 30 or 40 people.
Oh, those are really
The
big
smaller
groups.
ones about 15 or 10.
Can you share, Sharon, I guess if there was something about Marian that stood out the most to you, something when you think Marian, this is what you think.
But I think of her as somebody who is very passionate about what she did,
Mm.
and that she was very unsure in her own way of herself, because what she was doing was creating. And when you're creative, one always has questions about your creativity. You know, is this right or is this not right? So that she would turn to us as interns. And Claire Schmace was at the same time with me at that time. She would turn to us to question us, well, what did you think? And what do you think happened? Because she was still putting together in her mind how to structure and take all these ideas and put them in some kind of framework.
Mm-hmm.
And which she never truly did, but she had certainly ideas and kept refining them and revising ideas as she went along. I think of her as very courageous in her own way, because she was always worried that people would not understand what she was doing, and would be misunderstood in a way that would make it seem too simple.
Yeah, I find that that still resonates with me as a dance therapist today, that people just don't understand, and it seems very simple to people, and it's really a deeply rooted process.
Right.
Mm.
And the better you are at it, the simpler it looks from the outside.
That's a good point. Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you were to think of one fondest memory of working with Marian Chace, is there something that comes to mind for you?
Really watching her work and do her magic. She would do these various things, like at Christmas, do pageants or put on productions, actually, which was very interesting to watch, because she didn't just say, here, this is what we're going to do. It all came from the patients. So that even though it was not dance therapy directly, it was the same idea that there's a communication going on and a reflection of what people want and how to express it. So even in producing, say, a musical on stage, that would still be the same process. So her work with schizophrenics was, to me, amazing, just to watch how she did it.
And I'm thinking back to a little bit earlier when you were saying that you would ask questions and then sometimes you would ask the same questions because it didn't make sense, and continuing to ask in ways that would get you the responses. And so thinking about that, I'm wondering if ever you figured out from Marian or through your own practice what the essence of it is. If you were to hone in on the essence of dance therapy, what would that mean to you through your lens and Marian Chace's lens?
She clearly spoke that dance is communication. And so the dance is the important part, and all the aspects of what that means, what dance means, and that she's able to take. She really insisted that one be a dancer so that it's in your own body already, how to respond and what comes in and what you're able to put out. Because unless you're a dancer, you don't have the experience in your body about what this communication is about. That was the total, overhead. Dance is the important part. And from that, it was broken down into the body being, she understood the body as being, having had traumatic kinds of things happen to it before we talked about that in these days. She understood that and talked about how a graceful body is one that is able to be free of those kinds of traumas. And how do you get to that? But you cannot make people change. I think that's a hard thing for most people to learn, to be patient, that you cannot change people. They have to be ready for the change. So you keep hoping that whatever you're doing will enable that. So she, then besides the dance with the healing of the body is the communication and the expression. And she worked in groups because she felt that so many people feel isolated because of their illness. And to get past that isolation, to be with people in some kind of rhythmic kind of movement was very important, in which I agree.
Yeah, it's all these things coming together, the dance as the art form that we as dance therapists really resonate with internally, right? It's the communication then that we can have. It's the community through group settings. And I love that you said that the patient has to be ready. And so dance therapy can be an agent for change, but it can also be an agent for preparation for change, it sounds like.
That's right. I think that's one of the hardest things for new dance therapists to learn, is to be patient. We want change to happen, so we kind of force it sometimes rather than being patient enough to be available for it to happen, and to make what, and to enable through what we give and support that the possibilities will be there for the change to happen.
Trust in the process, right?
Yeah, trust the process and our bodies.
Yeah, we say that a lot, and I say that a lot as well. Like, you just have to trust the process, and I don't think we always articulate what that means. And so I appreciate your articulation of this idea of patience and allowing that space for the process to happen rather than trying to force the process to happen.
Yeah.
So thinking back, I'm going to ask you to tap in a little bit again, and thinking back to your time working as a dance therapist or working with Marian Chace, can you think of a particular experience with a patient that you had that was specifically meaningful to you or impactful?
I know I was thinking about that, and a whole train of memories began to unfold, which I hadn't thought about for so many years, of patients and people. And I was so grateful to all of them for the experience, for me, that they trusted me enough to allow that to happen. While I was still at St. Elizabeth's, I guess one of the things that, well, this was really a memory, but one of my learnings was she had me eventually cover other groups for people who were not there at the time. And I had to cover a group of blind psychotic patients. And that was a good learning experience because, of course, we talk a lot about imagery and symbolization. And boy, did I have to learn how to use it at that point, since I could not depend upon any kind of visual movement engagement. So that was a good learning process for me too. But memories of patients. Once, when I left St. Elizabeth's, I worked at Crownsville State Hospital in Maryland. And there were a lot of memories there. One of them was working with a young boy. He did not talk. He kept his eyes closed and just did nothing. And nobody knew what to do with him. So they gave him to me as a dance therapist. And that was kind of a very interesting experience because eventually, you know, through the process of working with him, he began to talk, he opened his eyes, he moved, he danced, and he became when they had a parade, he was the one who sat in the car and waved to everybody.
Oh.
So that was, you know, when he first said thank you because someone gave him a can of soda, we all kind of dropped our jaws because it was the first time anyone heard his voice.
Wow.
So that was pretty exciting. But
Yes.
there's so many memories, you know, just of the trust that you get from what you're doing, of working with a group of men in well, of course, those times we had back wards, you know, more, and this was an area of men who got in trouble in the areas they were, so they sent them off to this place. So this was a rather unruly more young men kind of group. And I would come in with my record player, hello, you know, and they didn't quite know what to do with me at first, but again, the process worked enough so that when other young men came in and began to try and, you know, intimidate me or flirt with me, whichever one, because at the time I was young, they were there to say, whoa, this is important, don't do that. You know, they understood something important was happening and were very protective of me in that setting. So that was rather powerful to me. And I have 6 more I can think of at the moment now too.
You can share more if you'd like.
Well, let me try one more at least.
One more, perfect.
This one more was when I was using, again, a back ward. I worked with these women who did nothing all day but sit because nobody did anything for them at the time. And I happened to use Mahalia Jackson because this was music that was important to them. But the nurse who was on duty that day came rushing in because she felt this was a sacrilege that we were moving to gospel music like this, and wanted me to take the record off, at which point these 15, 20 overweight women who did nothing but sit all day all stood up and made a circle around me. That we were going to move and we were going to keep that music going. It touches my heart still.
So beautiful. It's just very clear that you were able to provide something so meaningful. And it sounds like consistency, right? Just continuing to show up when people are challenging in one way or another. And that consistency of presence.
And willingness to be available to whatever, and to see people individually and respectfully, each of them.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you so much. So one more question, Sharon, and then we can open it up if you have more. But I'm wondering, with all of the knowledge and the history that you hold of the practice of dance therapy, what part or parts of it would be most important for you to see carried into the future? Because it is a shifting profession, right? As everything is. And so what would you say are the things that you would recommend holding on to a little more tightly?
One concern of mine is that we get very seduced by the verbalization of things and forget that it's the movement that is really the important part. And so I want to keep the dance in dance therapy and understand the total, all the healing processes involved in dance itself. Even if it's used differently, there's so many ways to use it, as we know, all over the globe, but not to lose the essence of what dance is about, and that being with people through that movement and being with each other through that movement. And somehow we're going to have to teach the world what that is, as much as they don't understand it, although many of them do. But until we are accepted, I think we need to hold on to who we are and not lose it.
Yeah, again, I think back to this phrase of trust the process, and the process is the dance.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I think we all came into this field because we know the power that the dance holds without the talking. And then we come in and for whatever reasons, nervousness or fears or insecurities or wanting to further the conversation, we do bring a lot of the dialoguing in. So maybe to make sure that the scales tip in favor of the dance and the movement.
Right. It's not that Chase never talked. I mean, of course she talked. We use everything we have, and verbalization is part of what we have. But it flowed within the movement itself, and not something that was separate to talk about afterwards somehow. We talk as we go along because we can ask questions. It's always asking the questions that's important, not giving answers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a kind of marriage between the movement and the curiosity that comes up from the movement, and just using that as an impetus for more information, verbally or non-verbally.
Yeah, right.
Sharon, is there anything else that you would like to share? Any thoughts, any questions, any comments, any final words?
Well, only that it was really a great honor for me to be able to start at the beginning, when it was the beginning. And I'm glad to see how it has evolved in so many places with so many people. And I hope it continues to do so, not only here, but globally, which is what my focus now is, to how do we all recognize what we are doing and respect and follow through on that. I feel very fortunate to have found this in my life. And often it's, I feel as if I received more than I gave, because it was such an important part of who I was, to be able to dance with people.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that as well. I find the work to be a profound experience of relationship that I don't think I would have ever learned if it were not for dance therapy.
Exactly, yeah. I'm just remembering now another memory.
Yeah, please.
They had this kind of camp in the summertime at the hospital. This was in Crownsville. And so I got to know this one man at the hospital, and he came into dance therapy group when we were back in the hospital. And one day he just kind of picked me up in his arms, twirled me all around. He was twirling around in a big circle, and I was not afraid. I didn't think he would hurt me or drop me, but I was yelling, "Mr. Brown, put me down, put me down." But it was, again, it was just one of those things of trust, equal trust. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's clear in what you've shared so far that the trust is really important in the relationship as well. And just by speaking about the young men that you worked with and how they trusted you and knew that when you came in, that was a sacred place. And so when new kind of challenging folks came in, they kind of cared for you in a very appropriate way, right?
Yeah.
Modeling this idea of what genuine relationship and healthful relationship can look like. And then
Exactly.
similarly with the women, right? When somebody outside of your community came in and said, oh, you can't do this, they kind of protected. And then this gentleman as well came in and felt safe enough to come into space and join you in a very kind of intimate place, which dance is a very intimate relationship. And so to feel the trust in both ends of the relationship, I think it's really paramount to what dance therapy is. It's this beautiful, trusting relationship that goes beyond words.
Exactly. It's that relationship that's so important.
Anything else, Sharon? Any memories popping up or any final thoughts you'd like to offer in our conversation?
Well, I'm just pleased to be able to share this much. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more that's going to be going through my head afterward, but I guess this is about as much as I can think of at the moment.
Well, I'm happy to have you jot down all of those things that resurface and come back in for part 2 if you ever want to do a follow-up interview.
Thank you so much, Jason.
So the last thing I will ask is an option for you. You can say yes or you can say no, but I'm going to ask if you would like to share some movement together.
As much as I can do at this point.
Yeah,
But
I mean, we don't have to get out of the chairs. You know, we can, we don't have to, but I just wanted to offer you an invitation to kind of think back to the space that you shared with Marian Chace and the space that you shared with your patients, and perhaps invite a little bit of movement if you'd like.
I
Yeah.
guess it's always a reaching out.
Yeah.
Come join me. Thank you. Yes, the world is big, but there is us. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful. Well, for now, for this round or this iteration, Sharon, we will wrap up. I thank you so, so much for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom and the history that you hold in this really important work that you have been part of from the beginning, have gotten us to present day with it. So I thank you so much for all that you have offered through the career, through the profession, and through this conversation with me.
Thank you, Jacelyn,
Mm-hmm.
for your support.